Hello and welcome to my video on Telltale Games The Walking Dead Season 1. This video will be a breakdown of the story and themes presented during the first 3 episodes of The Walking Dead. As a quick note, I will be referring to the game as The Walking Dead. If I make any reference to any Walking Dead media that isn't the game, I will make note of it while I am talking about it. Because this video is going to be a breakdown of the game's story, I will be spoiling much of the game and I will be referring to the story as I recorded it for this video. I will make note of different choices the players can make and how they affect the story, but my main focus will be on what happened during my playthrough. Also, one last thing before I begin with the game. While the game has a cel-shaded art style, it does depict graphic violence, so if you are sensitive to that, feel free to click away now. The game opens with a shot of a highway. You then see a police car driving down the highway. The game then cuts into the police car and you look at the main character, Lee, sitting in the back of the car in handcuffs. The two sit in the car quietly. The officer then looks back at Lee and says, "Well, I reckon you didn't do it then," breaking the silence. His reasoning for saying that you didn't do it is specifically because you aren't attempting to say that you didn't do it. The officer makes conversation with Lee, revealing that both of the men are from Macon, and that Lee got caught up in some senatorial mess when referring to whatever it was that caused Lee to end up in the back of the cop car on his way to prison. As you continue to drive down the road, you can see SWAT and police cars driving in the other direction towards the city, sirens running. You can also see a police helicopter flying towards the city shortly after them. As the officer is telling you stories about people he has escorted to the prison, he fails to notice a zombie and runs into it before driving off the road and crashing. Due to the crash, Lee falls unconscious. You come to for a few seconds and can hear the sound of a struggle before going unconscious again. Later, when Lee wakes up, he is forced to kick the window open before exiting the vehicle. Unfortunately for Lee, his leg was cut open, making it difficult for him to walk. Once Lee gets to the other side of the cop car, he sees that the officer is laying a short distance from the crashed car and his shotgun is next to the vehicle. Lee finds the keys, freeing himself of the cuffs, but once he has them off, the officer turns and becomes a zombie, surprising Lee and tripping him up. This forces Lee to crawl away before picking up the officer's shotgun, killing the zombie with it. Lee then sees a mysterious figure in the distance which looks to be a little girl. He calls out to her before she runs away. Shortly after this, zombies begin to encroach on Lee, forcing him to run to where he saw the little girl. He then quickly finds that a fence is in his way and climbs over it, falling into someone's backyard. Lee will then make his way into the house, announcing his presence as he does. Inside he finds the living room to be a mess and there's a pool of blood on the floor. Lee listens to 3 voicemail messages which tell a little bit about the progression of the recently started zombie apocalypse. The first message talks about a crazy guy attacking the father and sending him to the ER. The second one talks about how things are getting a bit hectic and they aren't allowing anyone to leave. The last message has the desperate mother calling, telling Clementine to call the police while crying, saying that they love her. After this, the player can hear someone talking over the walkie-talkie looking for their father. This is revealed to be Clementine as she says that you are in her house. You continue to talk to her, but unfortunately your conversation is cut short as her babysitter, who has been turned into a zombie, finds you and attacks you. Lee has a short fight with the babysitter before Clementine opens the door, giving him a hammer to finish the babysitter off with. Lee then has a conversation with Clementine where he agrees to look after her until they can find her parents. I then chose to have Lee leave during the day to look for someone to help, and potentially for somewhere safe to stay. Outside, Lee finds 2 men attempting to push a car out of the way, but before you can talk to them, Clementine shows some apprehension about leaving, but agrees to leave with Lee anyway. Lee then has a quick talk with the 2 guys before helping them to push the car. This scene is a bit weird to me because the 2 guys couldn't push the car before, but now Lee and his injured leg and one of the guys is able to push it better than the 2 could before, but this is just a minor nitpick. The group then drive off to the Green's farm where the other guy heads out, wanting to get back home to check on his mother. Herschel Green then walks out onto the porch. After taking a look at Lee's leg, he agrees to help him out, putting some bandages on his leg. After he's done fixing up Lee's leg, he recommends that Lee and Clementine sleep in the barn. Sean then walks out of the house and says that they need to reinforce the farm tomorrow morning. The next morning, you're woken up by Kenny, the father of the other family that is staying on the farm. His son, Ken Jr., also known as Duck, then pokes his head in, excited about being able to build a fence. Sean offers to allow Duck to be the foreman, saying that he can yell at him whenever he takes a water break. The mother Concha will look after Clementine, giving Lee a chance to talk to the other people on the farm. After a bit of talking, Lee offers to help Sean with the fence. Lee is tasked with cutting down some wood to be used as part of the fence, and once he is done, Lee goes to have a conversation with Herschel in the barn. Herschel will give Lee some advice about honesty, and once you go to leave, you hear some yelling in the background. You then go to find that Sean is being attacked by some zombies. Sean is stuck with his leg underneath the tractor, likely due to Duck messing with it. You are then forced to choose between helping either Duck or Sean. I decided to go with Duck. Regardless of who you choose, Sean will end up getting killed by the zombies, and his father comes out to find this. In his anger, he sends everyone else away from the farm. Kenny will have his car repaired and you leave with him, making your way to Macon. Once the group makes it there, the truck runs out of gas and they are forced to go find somewhere safe. After trying to call to some people for help, the group learns that the person they were talking to was actually a zombie. The group is then swarmed by zombies but receive help. They are forced to escape into a nearby pharmacy which was owned by Lee's family. Inside, you talk to a part of the group which saved you, which is comprised of Carly and Glenn, who appears in the comic books and show. You also meet Doug, Lily, and Larry. Larry shows the player that he's just a bit of a dick. He does this by learning about Doug and without even seeing him immediately assumes that he was bitten. Larry generally acts like a dick to everyone while also trying to get the group to kill Duck or at the very least throw him out. During this time, Clementine needed to use the bathroom, and upon getting the door open finds that a zombie is inside. Lee rushes to her aid but is unable to fight off the zombie. Seeing this, Carly shoots a zombie, the noise of which draws the attention of the zombies outside, but luckily what sounds like military-grade weapons going off in the distance draws the zombies away before they can break in. After this, Larry continues to be angry at everyone before his heart issues flare up, causing him to collapse. The player then agrees to go into the pharmacy so that they can get the medication that Larry needs. This begins the game's first puzzle. The puzzles in The Walking Dead are for the most part reasonable, not falling into the trap of making the solution so absurd that you don't know why it worked, although there are some minor issues that I have with them. Mostly this comes down to what you have access to and how you have to use it, although I'll talk about that for each puzzle individually. The solution here is that you need to get a universal remote to turn on the TVs in an electronics store nearby. You then need to get an axe from helping Glenn at the nearby motel to break down a lock that has been placed on the grate. From here you can then break the window of the electronics store. Doing this attracts all of the nearby zombies, allowing you to get the key from Lee's zombified brother who is working at the pharmacy and is trapped beneath a pole nearby. Before I continue on, I want to talk about two specific moments that happen while you're in the office to find the remote and at the motel. While you are searching through the office to find the remote, Carly will enter the office with you, revealing some of Lee's background, letting the player know why he started the game in the back of a cop car. Before the apocalypse began, Lee had been convicted of killing a senator. His reason for doing so was that the senator had slept with Lee's wife. To me, with the way Carly barges in and just starts expositioning at Lee makes this reveal feel somewhat forced, but I'm willing to ignore this. Later, upon arriving at the motel, you find Glenn hiding in an ice storage unit. He reveals that he found a woman who was crying stuck up in one of the rooms. He tried to help, but she refused and he was forced to retreat. After dispatching the zombies in the parking lot of the motel, Lee will then head up to the woman's room, killing the last two zombies in the area. Lee then talks to the woman, but she refuses to leave. In a somewhat stupid move, Lee tries to force his way into the room, but she decides to leave on her own. When she exits, it is then revealed that she is injured and is going to turn into a zombie. She then acknowledges that she is going to die and that she doesn't want to be turned into a zombie because it isn't Christian. She then notices that Carly has a gun and asks to use it to end her own life and to prevent herself from becoming a zombie. The player then has to make the decision between either allowing her to take the gun so that she can kill herself or not allowing her to do so in the hopes that she can be saved. I chose to allow her to do it. I knew she wouldn't be able to make it and figured it was better to allow her to die on her own terms. Lee then stays with her and lets the other two leave so that they don't have to witness it. Once she has killed herself, Lee takes the gun back and returns to Glenn and Carly, bringing the gun, the axe, and some gas that Glenn had siphoned off back to the pharmacy. Once Lee has the keys to the back room, he goes to get the medication, but for some reason the alarm begins to ring, forcing them to hurry and get the medication for Larry before leaving. In my opinion, the alarm going off doesn't make much sense because I'd think Lee would know about it due to his familiarity with the store. The store was owned by his family previously, and he obviously knew where the bathroom key was, when telling Clementine how to get into the bathroom earlier. Anyway, after Larry has gotten his medication, the group recognizes that they need to hurry up and get away from the store, so Kenny goes to fuel up his truck while Lee, Doug, and Carly keep the zombies out of the store. Before Kenny can come to evacuate everyone, the zombies begin to break in, and Lee is forced to choose between helping either Doug or Carly. In this playthrough, I saved Carly, thinking that saving her might help in the future if I ever needed the group to trust Lee. In the end, I couldn't save Doug and he was dragged out of the store before being eaten by zombies. Kenny then enters the store again, telling everyone to hurry up and get out. On your way out, Larry stops you from leaving before punching you in the face. Luckily, Kenny comes back and killed a zombie that was about to eat Lee before helping him up. The entire group then makes it to the motel from earlier where Glenn will leave the group, needing to go help his friends. I had Lee let him leave without any problem. I also had a conversation with almost everyone else before talking to Larry. Larry then reveals to Lee that he knows what Lee did, and that if Lee gets too close with Lily that he will tell everyone what Lee had done before the apocalypse. The episode ends with the group deciding to make the motel their new home, since by blocking up the entrance with the cars available to them they will be able to defend the place from zombies. They also have access to water and lights. Shortly after saying this, the power in the area begins to go out, and subsequently the lights begin to go out as well. At this point, episode 1 comes to a close. For the most part, episode 1 is good. The inclusion of characters from the show and comics seems a bit off, and some of the story moments don't quite make sense, but none of this was big enough to make the experience unenjoyable. After this, the player can begin episode 2. Episode 2 begins 3 months later. It is now autumn and Lee is out hunting for food, along with the character that joined the group in between episodes. His name is Mark. It is revealed that Mark was invited to the group due to a surplus of supplies he had and was able to trade in exchange for protection. As the two are walking, they hear yelling. Unsure of if it's Kenny, they rush to the source of the noise. Upon arriving, they find two high schoolers in their leather jackets and one of their teachers. The teacher is found caught in a modified bear trap that Lee can't manage to get open. His yelling starts to attract some zombies, and after some other options, I made Lee take the only option left, and that was to cut off the teacher's leg with Lee's axe. Mark then picks up the teacher and carries them back to the motel. As they are leaving the clearing, the zombies get too close to one of the high schoolers, Travis, and he trips while trying to escape and dies to the zombies. The title screen plays and it cuts back to them getting to the motel. They place the teacher on the bed of one of the trucks, charging Katja with tending to the leg that Lee had to cut off. A fight then breaks out between Kenny and Lily about food. Larry continues to be an angry old dick, and after this, Lily gets angry at Lee and appoints him as the food rationer for that day. Why she got mad and made Lee do it instead of Kenny in this situation is a bit confusing, but oh well. After this, I had Lee give food to Clementine, Duck, Mark, and Kenny, intentionally not giving any to Larry because honestly, I don't like him. Larry gets mad at Lee for not giving him any food, but Kenny appreciates Lee for taking care of his family and helping them out. Katja then calls you over and announces that the teacher couldn't have made it. After a short conversation, the teacher comes back as a zombie, surprising Lee and Katja when it attacks the latter. Lee is able to free her before getting into a struggle with the zombie himself. Mark comes over and tries to help you, but misses with the axe, causing it to get stuck in the truck. Lee then backs away from the zombie and off the bed of the truck. Carly then comes over and shoots it in the head. Kenny proceeds to get mad at Ben for not telling the group that the teacher was bitten. It is then revealed to the rest of the group that anyone who dies will come back as a walker. They don't need to be bitten to come back. In the middle of this exchange, two men approach the motel offering to give them food for gas. These men are the St. John brothers, Andy and Danny. The group agrees to trade their gas for some food since they are running low on food. Lee, Carly, Mark, and Ben return to the farm with the two brothers. On the way back to the farm, the group finds two bandits having an argument in the middle of the woods. This ends with one bandit killing the other before walking away. The rest of the way back to the farm goes by without incident. Upon getting back, the main group learns how the St. Johns protect the farm. They do so with an electrified fence. This is able to kill any zombie who blindly stumbles into the farm. When they get to the farm, they are welcomed by a friendly Brenda St. John who gives them some bread for the gas and mentions how their cow is sick. Mark mentions that Katja is a veterinarian, and Brenda offers that in exchange for Katja looking at the cow, they'll feed the group dinner for that night. They agree and Mark and Lee chat quick, sharing some slight apprehension. They decide they want to look at how defendable the farm is before bringing the whole group to the farm. They get a perfect opportunity to do this when Andy asks them to check on the fence. They offer to remove any zombies that have gotten stuck on the fence while Andy stays behind to work on the generators. While walking the fence, they find 3 zombies stuck to it. The first they simply push off. The second needs to have its hands cut off since its hands had gotten fused to the fence. The third had knocked over the fence, requiring Mark and Lee to climb over to the other side to remove it. Once they have the fence back up, the power is suddenly turned on and the two are ambushed by bandits who are using arrows to try and shoot Lee and Mark. They successfully hit Mark in the shoulder. By using a tractor as cover, the two are able to make it back to the other side of the fence and run back to the main house where Brenda takes Mark inside to take care of his arrow wound. As this is happening, the rest of the group arrives back at the farm except Ben and Carly, who were left behind at the motel so that they could look after it while the group decides if they want to move to the farm or stay at the motel. As a gesture of kindness, Andy is shown to have fixed the swing because he had seen Clementine and Duck in the group and thought the kids might enjoy some time on the swings. After this, the other brother, Danny, takes Lee out to do some reconnaissance on the bandit camp, leaving the others at the farm. Lee finds the camp, which turns out to be empty. In the camp, they find some boxes with the St. John logo on them, and Lee finds Clementine's hat, which was noted to be missing earlier in the episode. After this, Lee and Danny are accosted by a strange woman. It is implied that she knows the bandits but isn't a part of their group. She also implies that she knows something about the St. Johns and Clementine, but before she can reveal anything, Danny shoots her in the head. The two then return to the farm, now with her crossbow, Clementine's hat, and a video camera that they found at the camp. After they get back, Katja is taking care of the cow that was mentioned earlier, and Kenny and Lily are fighting. Again. Lee then goes back into the barn to find Katja, Andy, Duck, and Clementine all sitting with the cow. After looking around the barn, Lee finds a locked door at the back of the barn. Kenny enters during this time as well and finds Lee examining the door. Kenny tells Lee that he thought it was strange, seeing some sharp metal objects in the room before Danny was able to lock the door, preventing Kenny from noticing anything else. Lee tries to distract Andy by saying that Danny needed help, but before Lee could try and remove the lock with the multi-tool that he takes from a nearby toolbox, Andy returns. Needing something else that'll keep him busy longer, Lee walks out to the generator and along the way sees Larry getting along with Brenda, showing that the St. Johns are not to be trusted. Lee then removes the belt from the generator, distracting Andy longer so that Lee can get into the back room. As he's about to remove the latch, the dinner bell rings, causing everyone else to leave. Kenny says that he'll cover for you, and Lee then removes the hatch. In the back, Lee finds a slaughterhouse with a lot of blood in it. Andy comes back to you looking into the room, and Lee lies saying that he had just found it like that and that it was likely raiders, and Andy believes him. Lee then goes with Andy to the main house for dinner, but, being suspicious, Lee takes a look around the house, telling the St. Johns that he's going to wash his hands. Upstairs, he plugs in a power cable and sees light coming through a small hole in the closet. Lee then investigates the room, which is being hidden behind a bookcase. Inside, he finds a pale-looking Mark who is laying on the floor with both of his legs having been removed. Mark warns Lee not to eat dinner. Lee then rushes back downstairs and is able to stop Clementine from eating anything, but most of the others eat some of Mark's legs. The St. Johns admit to cannibalism, saying that they were raised not to waste anything, making the excuse that they didn't go after anyone who wasn't already going to die. Although Lee and Kenny won't mention this, I don't believe this to be the case, since in the back room of the barn and in a scene that is coming up soon, the player's attention is brought onto a bear trap which is similar to the modified one that Lee found the teacher in at the beginning of the episode. The mostly unarmed group is then held at gunpoint by the St. Johns, but this ends when Mark falls down the stairs and the St. Johns take advantage of this to knock Lee out, locking him, Kenny, Lily, Larry, and Clementine in the meat locker. When Lee wakes up, Larry is getting increasingly angry at the door, yelling for them to be let out. Eventually his heart issues flare up and he has a heart attack. It's unclear on if he's currently alive, but Lily begins to try and revive her father, but Kenny insists that they need to prevent him from coming back as a zombie. I had Lee side with Lily, trying to perform CPR on Larry. Kenny gets mad at me for not siding with him and he grabs a salt lick, crushing Larry's head with it so that he won't come back as a zombie. The group is shocked, but, still needing to find a way out, Lee thinks that he can remove the AC unit. Thinking he might be able to use the multi-tool, he is unsurprised to find that it was taken from him. Lee ends up needing to search through Larry's pockets to find some coins, and with that he is able to get the AC unit off, but they find that the hole is too small for any of them to fit through except for Clementine. Clementine then offers to go through the vents. Although initially hesitant, Lee allows this because they need to escape. After she has crawled through the door, you hear a small yelp from the other side of the door before it opens. She tells Lee that one of the brothers is sitting outside. Kenny, being annoyed with Lee not backing him up, leaves ahead of Lee, but Lee quickly catches up before Kenny can get anywhere. Kenny and Lee try to sneak up on Danny, but part of the way there, Andy comes out to the barn and Lee and Kenny are forced to hide in one of the stalls. Danny then walks into the barn preparing to kill all but one of the group that was locked in the meat locker. After peeking out to see what's going on, Lee opens the stall door to find Danny pointing his gun directly at him. Lee is able to grab the gun, causing Danny to miss his shot. Then, Danny and Lee fight. Meanwhile, Kenny, who was mad at Lee for not helping him to kill Larry, just watches. But Lily exits from the back room and surprises Danny, who is then forced to step backwards into a bear trap that he had just set up. With Danny now at your mercy, Lee can choose to either kill him or let him live. Danny begs for his life by saying that you need to eat him and that the meat will be ruined if you kill him. I had Lee let him live, specifically to give him the message that this isn't how the world works now, despite the pressure that people are put under due to the zombies. Lee then sneaks out of the barn where Carly and Ben sneak up through the corn stalks, saying that the group had been gone for too long. Lee informs the two that the St. Johns had attacked them. Lee then leaves the two to approach the main house. Inside he finds Katja being held hostage by Brenda. Lee slowly approaches trying to get Brenda to let Katja go. As he approaches, Lee's able to get Brenda to back up into the now zombified Mark, who grabs Brenda, causing her to let go of Katja. Once Katja is free, you hear Andy holding Duck hostage outside. Kenny tries to run at Andy to free his son, but gets shot in the stomach by him. After this, Carly approaches from behind and shoots at Andy, but just grazes him. Danny, who is caught off guard, accidentally lets Duck go, and Lee charges at him. Both of the men tumble down the hill, breaking a fence along the way. Andy is able to recover first, and before Lee can get up, Andy rushes at him and kicks him before walking over to the generator, turning it on to electrify the fence. Lee is then caught in a losing battle trying to keep Andy from pushing him into the fence, but luckily Lily walks out of the barn and shoots Andy, but again the shot isn't fatal. Lee then pins down Andy, punching him. Andy was then able to reverse the situation, being able to pin down Lee, getting a punch in before Lee pushes him off. The two then rush at each other again, but this time Lee is able to push Andy into the electric fence. Andy collapses but is still alive, but now Lee is able to pick up his gun. With no way to win the fight, Andy resorts to trying to insult Lee, also saying how once Danny and his mother arrive, the group will then be fucked. Lee informs Andy that Danny and his mother won't be coming. Fully defeated, Andy falls to his knees as Lee walks away. The players then presented the option to either kill Andy or walk away. I had Lee walk away, listening as Andy pitifully yells Lee's name, begging him to come back and finish this. Meanwhile, zombies break through the fence and slowly encroach on him, but he makes no attempt to get away. On the way back to the motel, the group happens upon an idling station wagon. In the back seat is a bunch of supplies. Kenny wants to take them, but Clementine is opposed to the idea, saying that they belong to someone. I agreed with Clementine, saying that we shouldn't take it, but the rest of the group decides to take the supplies in spite of my protest. In the car, Carly finds some batteries, which she gives to Lee to power the video camera he had found in the camp, and for Clementine's walkie-talkie. Lee turns on the camera, watching the video that was recorded on it. The video is shot from the woods right in front of the motel and has narration from the woman that Lee and Danny encountered at the camp, showing that she is clearly unhinged as she watches as Lee talks to Clementine about her missing hat. This is where the episode ends. For the most part, I enjoyed episode 2. In my first playthrough and my second, I didn't help Kenny to kill Larry, but for some reason, despite liking Lee up until this point, Kenny is now passive-aggressive and whiny towards Lee, while in my last playthrough, I never had this issue with Kenny. Also during this episode, I had some issues with audio levels, the most notable instance being when Lee sneaks out of the barn and talks to Carly and Ben. But in all, the story was enjoyable and the decisions were suitably difficult to make, although the episode feels a bit like filler since only one thing from the episode had any lasting impact on the story, that being the introduction of the idea that there are bandits. Now that we're done talking about episode 2, we can move on to episode 3. Episode 3 opens a week later with Lee and Kenny venturing into the town. Kenny is still acting passive-aggressive and asks Lee if he agrees with Kenny in wanting to leave, or wants to stay like Lily. He then notes that you likely want to stay since Kenny wants to go. The pair then go to climb over an 18-wheeler which is blocking the road, but the ladder on the side comes off once Kenny is on top of the truck. Lee then moves a military jeep so that Kenny can help him pull him up. As Kenny tries to pull Lee up, the shot that Kenny took while trying to save Duck begins to bother him again and he drops Lee back onto the jeep. Before they can attempt to climb up again, they hear someone screaming somewhere down the street. The two then notice a woman as she gets bitten by a zombie. Lee says that they need to shoot her to put her out of her misery, but Kenny suggests leaving her so that she can attract the zombies and buy them some time to loot the nearby store. As an act of kindness, I had Lee shoot her to put her out of her suffering. I knew she was going to die from her bite, and I saw it as cruel to leave her to die to the walkers. Kenny voices his dislike of my decision as we go to loot the store. Once they had finished collecting as much as they could, they both go to leave, but Lee gets trapped beneath a door when the zombies break it down and get into the building. Kenny looks back and decides against helping Lee. Lee gets himself out from underneath the door, but on his way out of the building, he's attacked by another zombie, and again, Kenny doesn't do much to help him. But Lee's able to get the zombie off of him before they make their way back to the motel. Upon making it back, Kenny tries to blame Lee, saying that they could have gotten more supplies if Lee hadn't shot the woman, but Lily sides with Lee, agreeing that it was the humane thing to do. After an argument about if they should leave or not, in a rage, Lily reveals to the rest of the group that someone has been stealing supplies before sending everyone out of the room. After this, I had Lee go back to talk to Lily, wanting to know more about the thefts. It is here that she reveals that someone has been stealing basically anything with opioids in it. She asks Lee to poke around and gives him a broken flashlight she found in the trash, saying that instead of throwing stuff away, they try to fix it. Upon exiting her room, it is revealed that Duck was listening in, and to keep him from telling everyone, Lee agrees to let him help. But before doing any investigation, I had Lee go and talk to Carly, since she had wanted to talk to Lee about something earlier. She tells Lee that she thinks that he should go to tell the rest of the group that he is a convicted killer. Her reasoning behind this being that if the group were to somehow learn about this in another way, they would be less likely to trust him. I agreed with her, and so I decided to tell everyone else in the group that he had been a convicted killer. I had Lee agree with her, and so I decided to tell everyone else in the group that he had been convicted of killing a man, and he was on his way to jail at the start of the apocalypse. Everyone else in the group appreciated me telling them about this, and once Lee is done, he begins to go investigating. Lee then finds some broken glass on one side of the motel, and nearby he finds an X written in pink chalk. Duck then catches up with Lee and lets him know that he had found some pink chalk underneath the trash bin that they use as a gate into the motel. Nearby you find a paper bag that is hidden inside of a grate, and the bag is filled with medicine. Lee then brings this straight to Lily, who wants to gather up everyone to find out who did it. But before they can, the motel is attacked by bandits, and Lily is forced to slip out the back window, asking that Lee stall the bandits. After keeping them talking for a minute, Lily shoots and kills the one that Lee is talking to, and a fight breaks out between both groups. While this is happening, some zombies are able to get into the fight unnoticed. Lee covers the group as they run to the RV, planning to use it to escape. But before Katja and Duck can make it to the RV, a zombie gets to them, and without anyone realizing it, Duck gets scratched by it. The group then escapes in the RV, and Lily begins to look for whoever was stealing the medication, starting by blaming Carly, eventually blaming Lee, Carly, and Ben at separate points in the conversation. Partway through this, they run over a zombie and are forced to stop so that Kenny can remove it from beneath the RV. Lily takes this time to continue the conversation about who is stealing the medication. This continues until Kenny gets the zombie out from underneath the RV and kills it. As he rejoins the others, Lily, who has been getting increasingly aggravated, raises her gun and before anyone can react, shoots Carly, killing her. I then had Lee make the decision to leave her behind. She has a breakdown saying that she has nothing left and that she is just trying to help the group. The last we see of her is her running away from a nearby zombie. After a bit of time on the road, Katja and Kenny reveal to Lee that Duck was bitten during the raid. Katja is going to look after him and they're going to continue going east to Savannah. Lee then shares this information with Clementine before they both fall asleep. In the morning, the group finds that a train is blocking the road so they can't continue on to Savannah, but upon investigation, the group learns that the train is going to Savannah anyway, so they decide to use that to make their way to the city instead. Lee then begins to work on getting the train running and decoupling one of the derailed train cars. Once he has both of these things done, he meets a guy named Chuck, who has been living in the boxcar. Chuck agrees to come along since he'll be taking us home with you, and he doesn't object to you doing so, although he is undecided if he wants to stick with the group after this. Kenny then gets the train going, but after a while Katja gets Lee's attention, informing him that Duck is out of time and there's nothing she can do to keep him going, as his condition keeps getting worse. Lee went to talk to Kenny so that he will stop the train, but Kenny is in denial and refuses to stop the train, saying that Duck will be just fine. The two continue to talk, eventually getting to the source of Kenny's guilt, being that he blames himself for Sean's death from episode 1, thinking that he didn't do anything to save him and basically had killed him. Lee then tells Kenny that it wasn't his fault that Sean died and that he was simply trying to save his own son. Kenny begins to calm down and stops the train before going back to see Katja and Duck. Katja says that he is almost out of time, and they can't allow him to become a zombie, and that while she doesn't want him to turn, it's inevitable. Kenny desperately searches for anything to save Duck, or at least stop him from turning, but there isn't anything they could do. Knowing that they would have to shoot their own son, I had Lee offer to do it in their place, his reason being that no parent should ever have to kill their own child, and they initially say that a parent should do it, but Lee insists and Katja thanks him for doing so. Katja and Kenny then walk into the woods so that they can do it away from Clementine and the rest of the group. Lee stays behind to explain it to her, but midway through the explanation you hear this.
I'm not stupid. I just want you to tell me, like my dad would.
Look, Clem, things are... What the?
No!
You rush to the source of the sound to find that Katja has shot herself, leaving just Kenny and a dying Duck. Kenny is lost and asks what to do next. Again I say that I will prevent Duck from turning into a zombie to keep him from having to do it himself. Lee will then shoot Duck. Kenny, now completely broken over the loss of his family, focuses on the one thing that he has left, getting to Savannah. Once everyone is back onto the train, Lee will go to have a conversation with Clementine. Clementine says that she is thinking about what Chuck told her earlier, telling Lee that Chuck said what happened to Duck would happen to Clementine as well. This makes Lee mad, so he goes to have a conversation with Chuck. When confronted about it, Chuck sticks to his gun, saying that Clementine needs to learn how to use a gun so she can defend herself, a haircut so that she isn't so easy to grab, and a plan so they know what they are trying to accomplish. Ultimately, Lee ends up agreeing with Chuck and teaches Clementine to shoot, cuts her hair so it isn't so easy to grab, and goes over a map of Savannah with Clementine so they know where they want to go within the city. While doing all of this, Ben stops Lee and admits to being the one who is giving the bandits the medication, essentially revealing that he is the reason that Carly and Duck are currently dead. Lee is understandably mad about all of this, but tells Ben to keep this quiet from the rest of the group. After a little bit, the train is stopped at a bridge due to a petroleum tanker hanging on the path in front of the train. The group then talks about what to do, and two people reveal themselves from on top of the bridge. Their names are Omid and Krista. Lee climbs up to talk to them and invites them to join the group. They decide to think about it once they get the tanker out of the way. Lee then inspects the tanker and finds that he won't have any way to be able to remove it. He needs to cut it apart to have any hope of removing the obstacle. Lee and Clementine will then go to investigate a nearby building. Inside they encounter a few zombies, and once they are cleared out, Lee finds a blowtorch which he thinks he can be able to use to cut down the tanker. Halfway through cutting it down, the tanker shifts and Omid is able to pull Lee back before he gets hurt or killed by the shift of the tanker. Unfortunately, this shift makes it so that Lee can't reach the tanker to continue cutting it, so he has Omid do it while Lee keeps him from falling off the bridge. This proves successful, but as they're about done, Ben notices a herd of walkers approaching the train. Omid is able to finish cutting the tanker and it falls out of the way of the train. From here, Omid and Lee are forced to jump onto the top of the train, and Lee lands just fine, but Omid is less willing to jump and ends up injuring his leg after falling onto the ground. Krista then jumps out to help him, and Lee has to choose which one to help onto the train. Seeing as how he was injured, I helped Omid onto the train, thinking that Krista would be able to get herself onto the train. Krista then begins to fall behind the train, and Omid yells at Lee, saying that he should have helped her up since she is a woman, but then Krista catches up and jumps onto the train alongside Omid and Lee. A while after this, Lee is sitting in the front of the train along with Clementine. He sees a drawing she has of Kenny, Katja, and Duck. As you're looking at the drawing, Kenny enters the room along with Lee. After a short conversation between the two, they hear Clementine's walkie-talkie spring to life. From the other side, they hear a voice say that he can't wait for Clementine to get to Savannah, and that he has her parents right there waiting with him. He says that she should try and make sure to find him no matter what, regardless of if Lee wants her to or not. Kenny and Lee are both incredibly concerned by this, and on this note, the episode ends. This third episode, in my opinion, was the first big instance of an emotional choice within the Telltale Games Walking Dead series. The moment where Lee has to choose who will be the one to kill Duck to avoid making him a zombie was a really hard moment to play through. The emotional pain that both Kenny and Katja are going through is hard to watch without also tearing up myself, and while I don't think this is the most emotionally crushing moment in Season 1, it is an easy pick for the number 2 spot. Also, during these first few episodes, the introduction to Clementine is really well handled, with little moments with her during the game helping to endear the player to her, which in turn gives the player a reason to think about their decisions because they'll be asking themselves, what will Clementine think about this? Thank you for taking the time to watch the first half of my discussion about Telltale Games The Walking Dead Season 1. Hopefully in another week or two I can get out my second video talking about episodes 4 and 5. And like always, thank you for watching.